My name is Don Gardner. I'm the emergency manager for Clearwater County, Idaho. I'm also an instructor for COML, COMT, AUXCOM, and I'm the chair of the COMU for the state of Idaho. So I'm plugged in pretty good to all these programs, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But today we're going to talk about the Winlink exercise we held in Idaho, and quite the story. So let me get this screen shared and see what I got here. Well, it appears I'm already there.
Yeah, you're pretty well set to go.
All right. Can you see the slides?
I see slides.
All right, I'm going to try to make them big and wide. There we go. All right.
That works.
That works good. All right.
Yeah, you earned
Well,
it fun tonight too.
We don't have a lot of slides, but there's some key points I want to make sure I bring out on this. On October 5th, 2022, Idaho held its first ever Idaho statewide amateur radio operators and Winlink exercise. We had over 175 participants. Not all were ham radio operators. Some were part of the emergency management agencies, but those participants came from the local Idaho County EOCs, and there's 44 counties in Idaho. Licensed amateur radio operators, Idaho Amateur Radio Clubs, the Idaho Radio Emergency Services, or ARES, participated. Idaho Office of Emergency Communications participated, and Idaho Web EOC. And we had a lot of fun. But to get us there, I want to take us back a little bit. The history of Winlink and this program in Idaho. And it doesn't really go that far back, so here we go. December, I can't even see my own screen. Hang on a minute. Anyway, in December, we held our first of 21. We held our first Winlink Wednesday net of Idaho. What we did is we put together a program called Winlink Wednesdays of Idaho. And we kind of kicked it off small in December of 21. And the whole purpose of that was to get to learn the program, kind of promote the program, and just get good at it by learning from our mistakes. In February 1st of 2022, being an emergency manager, I was at the Idaho Emergency Management Conference, the IEMA conference in Boise on February 1st. And I had time there, and I demonstrated Winlink. I sat there in a hotel conference room with a radio and a laptop, projected on a screen, and showed them how Winlink worked. I took the president of IEMA, and I said, beforehand, I said, give me your email, and I'll send you a Winlink message. And I did. And she got it in front of everybody. And then she replied, and I got it back from her, and everybody could see. And a lot of people were very impressed. So we also announced that there would be, this is in February of this year, announced that there would be a statewide Winlink exercise in October of 2022. So what happened between January and September 28th? We had 39 Wednesdays. So we had 39 Winlink Wednesdays of Idaho nets. And remember, the purpose of this net was to learn, to make mistakes, figure out how to do it better, and learn. We had, over that time, over 95 different amateur radio operators participate. That made for 1,308 check-ins during that 39-week period. And during that 39-week period, we did all sorts of things, and that's what the net was for. Here's some of the things we did. We trained. This is all from that Winlink net that we hold in Idaho, which everybody, doesn't just Idaho, anybody can participate. We taught how to fill out forms, and we practiced different forms. The month of July, we did a 4th of July patriotic questions and see how many knew some of the history. We asked people to send pictures. Yes, these are all pictures that were sent via Winlink. And you can see we've got from go kits to dogs to setting up antennas to someone messing up with a fun picture face. But we did this, and what we learned was the size of things that really could move through Winlink, how easy it was to overload a node if everybody was in the same area. Different applications react differently, different forms react differently, and how to do that properly. So there was a lot of learning curve, even for myself. We learned a lot during those exercises, and that's, those nets, that's what the nets are for, is to learn and to practice our skills and get better. So starting in August, the exercise was coming up in October, we started pushing out all the documentation. We put out the exercise overview, which gave a little more details of what was to happen. And those that participated will remember this slide. We had this flow chart. It looks a little confusing. I was hoping it wasn't too confusing, but the goal here and the whole purpose here, and here's how I'm going to describe this, is we had amateur radio operators wanting to participate from all walks of life. We had those that just were not part of any club or organization. They were just amateur radio operators and they wanted to participate. They would fall under group number 1. And then we have clubs. We have good clubs out there and we have Aries groups out there. They were group number 2. But the goal here, the whole purpose of this exercise was to do situational awareness of a simulated, the actual exercise was a simulated cyber attack on the power grid. And those things would cause problems like point of purchase and radio stations and also public works, sewers and so on and so forth. And so these were to be reported, and this was simulated. It was an exercise. Then what we had to do is, and our goal is, and do remember, all incidences are local. When something happens, it happens at a location, not usually statewide or nationwide. That's rare. So at that location, the first person that you need to get a hold of is your local emergency management system, whatever that is in your state, whatever. In Idaho, we have emergency managers in 44 counties, and that is your connection. That's the flow that you need to follow. So in position number 3, we wanted to have a lead, someone that knew that emergency manager, someone that had a relationship with that emergency manager, someone that could work with that emergency manager. That lead would collect all of the ham radio documentation, compile it, and deliver it to the emergency manager. Then that emergency manager would take that and deliver it to what we call WebEOC. Some of you may have heard that before. That is the system from which we can send in reports and such. And that would, we worked with the state of Idaho. We got WebEOC to set up an exercise page. And that would provide information directly to those who can support an incident in your area. Now, grant you, an exercise like this was compressed in time. And so if you think about it, this would be more spread out. And we'll get into more details here in a minute. Then in September, we published the Amateur Radio Exercise Playbook. This was 14 pages of how to do it, what to do, how to fill out the form, how to submit your report, who to submit your report to, and so on. And we had personnel problems. We had a hard time recruiting people, but that's the nature of volunteerism. And then we had the Emergency Managers Playbook. That was, for them, it was only 8 pages. Remind them how to use WebEOC, how to access WebEOC, and the such. Let's see if I can get out of that. There we go. All right. So what happened, we're going to go through and see. Now, all of you have probably seen this before. This is Winlink Express. The day of the exercise, I had support in my office. Other emergency managers had support, and we had some emergency managers that did not want to participate. That's one of our hurdles. The goal, you were to fill out a situational report, and depending on your call sign of what you would be reporting as a problem. If it ended in a certain number, you reported cell phones were out, or this problem was happening, or this problem. So we had a variety of things. So on here, you can click the map and create a display map of the event. And this is from the actual exercise. I'll make it a little bit bigger. These are all the points of contact. Yes, someone from Louisiana. The Louisiana person actually lives in Idaho, was on vacation in Louisiana, is my understanding. Someone in New Mexico. I'm not sure how they were connected, but they were. And then, of course, a few in Oregon and Washington. But let's zoom in here to Idaho for a minute. Now, it's really interesting. You can see the population centers and the areas where ham radio is popular. There's good clubs and the such. In Winlink here, I can hover over one of these. It tells me who it is and such. But if I click on it, it gives me that report. I want you to kind of observe this. I'm going to show you a different way to look at this. So on this, you can see landlines are functioning. They didn't answer. They were saying cell phones were functioning. No. Voice phones, no. You see some no's in there and some yeses. And everybody had different reports. In all, we got 156 reports. That's not accurate to how many actually participated. What happened was some people in an exercise and even in a disaster expect an immediate response that they sent you something. So in 10 or 15 minutes, they'd resend it. And that created another report. So that's one of our findings, is the patience of the report. So anyway, we've got all these different things we can click on. You can see it gets pretty crowded down here in Boise, Napa, and over here in Twin Falls and Idaho Falls. Coeur d'Alene, they did really good up in this area. So, but let's narrow this down. What's really nice, go up here to this corner and select filters. And this is the report we're working on. I'm going to take cell phones, the voice functioning, if you see right there. I can go over here and say, if they said no, turn their dot, let's go red. Okay, I'm going to save that. Now look how many participants said, hey, I got no cell phone coverage. Really easy to do. You can go in there and do other filters. You can do, well, let's do something really simple. Commercial power. Let's say not working, and we'll give it a different color. Let's give it green. Now you notice some of these turned white. The reason they did is because they have both of the problems. You have a green one here though. And so as you see, it grows. You can change these things. What's also nice is you can create what's called a summary. Up here on the taskbar, we're going to create a summary. And you'll see here, I said that there was 156 participated, but actually there's only, nice that this report tells me there was 151 unique reports. So that kind of helps us down. And you can look, percentages, just an overview. Landlines functioning, we had 23.8% no. We had 43.7% that was an unknown. We can go down here, TV, satellite, the numbers change as you move, cable TV. Remember, it was an exercise, so it wasn't actual. Public works and waterworks, 58.9% says they're not working. There's a problem. That's not necessarily good. Commercial power, 31.7%. But yes was 48.3%. Do you think your emergency manager would like to know the percentages? Do you think the state of where you reside, for me, Idaho, would like to know where the highest problems are and what they are? Natural gas, pretty low, 7.9%. Not something I'm going to look at right away, and so on. So you can see there is plenty of information to gather here. TV stations functioning. Didn't get a lot of response there. Satellite and other services are really. Now we can go over here and we can print this report. We can clip it to a clipboard and move it somewhere else. And we can only use maps that reports that match our color coding of the systems, like the red dots and the green dots and the red dots. So this is all nice. I want you to look one more time what this report looks like. And I want to show you a better way to do it. But this is Winlink, and it's a good service, and it helps. But there is a better way. But before we go there, this is the map program. You can create a CSV file. That's an Excel file without a lot of programming data in there, so it can be easily translated into a mapping program. You can create a COML file. That is Google Earth. And yes, we're going to go there in a minute. But what's also nice is you can change how the map looks. You have all these different maps. And you even have a map for when there is no internet. These others require internet access. When there is no internet, you can still use this system. But I can take these reports and I can export that data. And I could send it to you. And you could take that exported data. It's not very big. It goes over email fairly well. And you could import it to your Winlink, look at it, and play with it. That's cool. So for fun, let's go to Google Earth. Here's the report in Google Earth. Everybody see my Google Earth? We still doing good? All right, good. Thumbs up. I like it. Now, remember how that report looked on Winlink? Let's go pick a report like right here. Isn't that nicer? I mean, I like this. And this is, I mean, Winlink created this. They just did a really good job here for Google Earth. And so you have the rankings, you have the actual, what they were looking at and how it's been reported. Very nice. Very nice. Now, what is very interesting is, look at this cluster down here. We would need to click on a lot of things. But you know what? That report we get really helps us. Remember that summary report. And we can do a summary of just a local area. We could do a summary of southern Idaho, central Idaho, northern Idaho. Now, while I got this up, I'm just going to share a little bit some of the issues we had during the exercise, some of the lessons learned. There is an after action report. It is finished. We need one more approval on it, and it will be published probably tomorrow or Monday. And everybody that would like a copy can have a copy. Anybody that wants a copy of this data through that import-export CSV system, I'm happy to send it to you. You'd get the same thing. I can send you the KMZ file, KML file from Google Earth. Really helps. And let's go down here. Here's our Louisiana guy. There's his report. Now here's one that was the same person, was not patient necessarily. I got two reports from them. It gives the call sign, when they sent it and everything. It gives me all the details that I could use. So part of the confusion, I think, in Idaho, and I think this can be nationwide, is who are the amateur radio operators? If they're not attached to a club, or if they're not attached to ARES, we don't know who they are. Now, as an emergency manager, from my perspective, I don't know who they are unless I was a ham radio operator myself, which I am. How do I go out and say, hey guys, I understand you could do this. Would you do it for me if it's a bad day? And that's always a challenge for emergency managers that have no amateur radio background. That's why you remember we wanted a lead in each county. And that lead needed to be sure to have that relationship with the emergency manager. Another finding we found is the Winlink forms are based on somebody else's perspective, and that's okay. The SIT rep has grown. We keep adding things to it. The SIT rep was maybe a dozen things earlier this year, and now it's in the 20s worth of things to check off. So we had a discussion after the exercise. We had a hot wash right afterwards, the Zoom hot wash, which we took notes and recorded. We also had a feedback form for everybody to fill out that wanted to. And one of the discussions was we need to custom make the forms for Idaho. Idaho itself, its big problems are wildland fire, flooding, and severe storms, snowstorms, wind power, things like that. Now, Texas would be different. Florida would be different. California would be different. California, I think, gets a little bit of everything except hurricanes. There's a monsoon season, though. So all these things, I think every state can fine tune some of these documents, and we can. State of California did for Winlink have their own group of forms. And so that's something that we're going to propose for leadership in Idaho with amateur radios, emergency managers. What do we need to know? What is it that we need to track? We kind of need to know what roads are open. We kind of need to know where the highest risk is. And if you look at the FCC database and you do a search for all the amateur radio operators in a particular zip code, you would be floored at how many are in your area that you don't even know. And so how do we reach out to them? I was amazed. I had one gentleman in a very remote area, somehow through word of mouth, learned about this exercise. I said, I want to participate. I want to be part of my community. I just don't want to be part of a club right now. So how do we reach those people? That's an egg I haven't figured out how to crack. This exercise alone was like herding cats. Everybody had concerns, which was good. Everybody, I didn't get that document. Where do I get that document? How do I do this? How do I do that? And that's all right. But the issue is a lot of times we are learning this ourselves at the same time. And in a disaster itself, there's not a lot of guidance. So that's why we need to practice. We need to learn these things. We need to do it when it's mundane, because then we'll know how to do it when it's not. Some of the other things we found was, I had one gentleman on his feedback form says, oh my gosh, I thought I knew what I was doing. I did this. Boy, I got a lot to learn. Another person wrote, I've only been a ham for 1 year. Oh my gosh, this was the best thing ever. And it really enjoyed it. So when herding cats, you still have a lot of success. I really don't have a lot more to share, so I guess we'll go to questions. I don't know if this is a chat here. So Dan, if you want to throw open the doors for questions. What's that? Let's see.
Barry,
I'm here.
you want to pick up the chats?
I'm watching the chats. There's nothing right now.
Okay.
I got one here, yeah, from Dennis. Do you have this included in your EOC or SOP? That's a great question. In my EOP, which is an emergency operation plan, actually, is what we call it. We have what's called ESFs. We mimic a lot of other agencies, and we have ESF2, which is communications. And because I did write it, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a ham for a long time. Yes, it's in mine, but it is others? I don't think so.
Can I talk to you low on your desktop?
Yeah, let me do that.
And Victor's got his hand up. Victor, what you got in your mind?
I'm just going to stop sharing right now. There we
Okay.
go.
Oh, I think I got my fingers on my mind, but anyway, good evening. A couple points. You talked about getting those repeat emails or Winlink mails. Patience is so critical. I've seen it in business and I've seen it in radio communications, even in our radio sports sometimes. People think they are not being heard. Operators are writing down your call sign. They will get back to you in a moment, hopefully in order. But yes, patience is such a critical thing. I was involved in a drill recently with only 3 teams. I had teams 1 and 2 talking to me, and I had to stop and turn around to the incident commander, and I thought that would have been clear from the questions that were stated to me to pass on to the incident commander. And the 3rd team jumped right in and said, I need to talk as well. Yeah, I mean, yes, I know you're out there. We're going to be polling you in a minute. The other critical part of that is listen to your radio. Listen to what's going on and what's being said so that you know whether, I hope we're smart enough that we can assume and understand when a question is being passed on to incident control and coming back to us. The second point I have tonight is this idea of I don't want to belong to a club. I hear that a lot, and I'm starting to tell people, well, ACS, ACs, we're not a club. We're a business organization. Exit out of that club mentality, and because it's a business organization, we are a community organization serving, and I think that helps. I think that's a more positive approach. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may add something I forgot to share, which I'm very impressed with one club. This exercise was on a Wednesday, business time. It started at 10 o'clock Mountain Time, 9 o'clock in the morning, Pacific Time. And a lot of people work. A lot of people have other obligations. And I was contacted about that, and they said, hey, a lot of my people can't participate because they're going to be at work. So this club came up with a solution for them in Ada County, which is our most populated county in Idaho. And the night before, and they held a radio net, which they have a lot of people, and they took this data down through their net and then pushed that forward in the morning, which was great. It was a great solution to not being able to participate in the day, because we're not trying to eliminate people. A lot of people ask, why did we do it in the day? Because that's when your emergency managers are going to be in their office. I'm not going to get them on a weekend or at night to participate in that exercise. So that was part of that goal. So yeah, Ada County, very big hurrah to them for figuring that out and working that out. That was really, really good. Couple questions here real quick. There was Dan asked about what protocols did most of you use. This is the first year we cut our teeth on Winlink. And yes, there is some scheming going on here on our side. The first year, it did not matter, and we're still in this first year. Did not matter of what protocols you used. You used what you could use, including Telnet, because our goal this year was to learn the program, learn the Winlink program, learn how to do forms, learn how to send pictures. This is great for damage assessment. This is to learn Winlink. Then next year, we're going to work towards non-internet connectivity for those that can do it, make sure people can test their equipment, find where they can connect. But that doesn't mean everybody used the Telnet or the internet portion of it. We had people going as far as Japan to make their connection. I had one report from someone in a very populated area, says all the nodes were just jammed full. Finally got to Salt Lake and I was able to get through. So that's how we're approaching this year. We're learning the actual program. Let's see, what other questions we got?
Well, we got Dan WL7COO. He's got his hand up.
Okay.
Go take it away, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I'm real impressed with what you're doing. In California, it's a very different situation with probably I suspect that we have more gateways per capita than most states. I'll start there. And one thing that just came to my mind as in the brief conversation since you started taking questions was in subsequent years, it's going to be critical to keep the ability for those who can only use Telnet in your exercises, or we're going to cut ourselves off from new blood. Because it takes a while. You know, I'm checking in, I'm retired and I'm spending obscene amounts of time seeing just what I can do with Vera HF. And I cracked up when you mentioned somebody, I almost got a message sent through Tokyo. Couldn't quite do it with my wire where it is now on 100 watts. But Winlink will get information through where voice, you know, in a fraction of the time, it'll take you to figure out where to do it on voice.
Yeah, and one of the lessons, this may insert right here, that we've learned through the year is the data can really take a long time based on what you're sending. A picture that's not well formatted can take a really long time to send or receive. Even some of these forms that are in the Winlink system can take a long time to send or receive, and knowing that helps. But go ahead, continue.
Well, there's issues there about forms and overhead that I'm going to stay away from, because every time I put my toe in it, somebody stomps on it. But I think that'll get resolved. And the issue of the field situation report continuously growing. Hopefully you do know who to talk to get word to the Winlink development team. And a suggestion might be allow different entities to select from among the infinite list of items they want on their reports. So, and I know Greg's gonna either enjoy doing this or I'll hear from him about it.
Well, and Dan, I'm not positive on the process of creating our own forms, but I know California did. And if you go into the forms in Winlink, it's in there. Anybody can access the California forms. You know, they're growing the forms a lot, and there's some really good stuff in there. So that is something that's one of our missions in the future to do.
Okay, Tom, you got your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. One of the jurisdictions, one of the big, a state that I won't name, don't want to start a brawl with anybody, said or got the impression that they had to send every 214 with a signature. And it had to end up with a true signature at the end. So they were sending every 214 as an image. And I got kind of mad at them. I said, look, you may be able to do that, oh, gee whiz kind of thing during a drill and look real impressive to the public officials. And then you're going to fall flat on your face if you try and do it during a real McCoy when it's hundreds instead of dozens of messages. And then Craig Fugate, who was the FEMA administrator at the time, said somebody's trying to sell them scanners and scanning software because that was never a FEMA requirement. And that was the justification for doing it, was that FEMA required a signature. He says, the originator gets the blasted thing over to finance and it all gets done from there. Right. You know, as long as the originator gets the copy to finance, everything will work out. You don't have to send it on the message. So just a point of interest. I don't know if that jurisdiction's still doing it, and luckily they're far enough for me that I don't have to care.
Thank you. I'm going to answer a couple of the chat questions real quick. There's one, let me go back to it. Was any of this carried via shares? No, shares was not part of this because shares is more for vetted agencies, not ham radio operators themselves. You know, like my office, yes, I'm a shares member. Yes, the state is a shares member. And yes, I could use that, but the guy by himself in his home is not. And so this was just to get the amateur radio operators involved. So in the future, you bet, that could be a process. Let's see. I don't know the answer to this next one, Bill. Sorry. How do you plan to get more emergency managers to participate? I break kneecaps when I need to sometimes, but I'm not sure that'll work. That is the herding the cat, part of the herding the cat problem. What was the size of the largest image that was transmitted? We didn't do any image transmitting during this exercise. We've only done it during nets, and Winlink will actually tell you when it's too big. Anybody in the audience, any hands up or anything, Dan?
I don't see any more hands up right now. Dennis made a comment, he's in Boise, and they're going to be in chat there. They're updating their SOP to reflect what you're saying here.
Yeah, and it's the human nature of people, and yeah, I'm human too, I admit that, all have a misconception sometimes of what a disaster is like. And let me share you something I understand. As an emergency manager, as a retired firefighter for 20 years, I've been an incident commander. Ham radio was not what I needed. Incident commander was dealing with the response. I would go to the emergency manager to get information that the public was providing. I'd let them be the buffer. That's why it's so important to make these relationships, not with incident commanders, but with the emergency managers, the EOC. When you deal with a disaster, the response is so important that a lot of times people have their blinders on and don't know what other sources there are to come from. And that's why a well-vetted, well-educated emergency manager is your key. Now, how do we get to all of them? I had one emergency manager in Idaho, we'll leave their name out, who's a ham, but very amateur level. Only thought that Aries was the only thing in Idaho. There were no other clubs. Why is a ham coming who's not part of Aries? And got that person very confused. And, it's hard to wrap your mind around all this. Aries is a great organization, but they aren't the only people on the block. We have a lot of Oxcom training going on and so on, which is FEMA-based training. This all needs to work in concert, and we all got to play in the same sandbox, especially if we want to serve. There, I'm off my soapbox.
No, you're doing good. Music to my ears. I like what you're saying. I know how you feel about that. Are there any more hands to go up? Okay, Barry, how we doing?
We're good in the chat. We're up to date.
Okay, done. Great presentation. Great presentation. I'll get this out to all the guys in Idaho, and so we can, I think there's information everybody can use off of this.
And
And
Dan,
just
I will
like
be
Dawn
sending
had mentioned an incident commander. When you have a disaster, you're going to have 5, maybe 10 or 15 incident commanders, because there's going to be 15 separate incidents, even within one county. So that's why it's important to have a single point of contact with the single point of contact with the communications. It works wonders when that happens.
Yeah, amateur radio operators tend to shoot themselves in the foot. Sometimes they say, I'll help when something happens, I'll come help, but they don't want to train or practice or get to know. You don't want to be exchanging business cards for the first time during a disaster. That's just a fact. With that in mind, though, Idaho is very mixed. We don't have super metropolitan areas. I mean, Boise is fairly large, Coeur d'Alene is fairly large, but you have very rural areas. Very rural areas need that communication piece. They really do. And that's where I encourage the foothold to get is in rural areas because you can see it, that it's needed.
Okay, Dan, you got your hand up again. Dan? Well,
You're muted, old son.
Sorry, I noticed that Oliver's here, so I'm going to be very circumspect in use of language. But the way that you just showed the fluency of setting filters with word searches about what's in the field situation report, I think points at a key capability that a lot of us need to spend more time just playing with. Because you see it once, you see it twice, you see it 3 times, all of a sudden you need something. And if you haven't played with it thoroughly enough, you're not sure if you can do it so that it'll be meaningful in the timeline available in response to an emergency. So practice, practice, practice. And
Yeah, and Dan, you bring up a very good point. I did mention that the after action report improvement plan just needs one more approval and it's ready to go, but I can, for anybody that would like, I showed you in Winlink that I could export the data that we played with tonight. And that's a lot of good chunk of data. And I'm willing to send it to anybody that would like to play with it, but you got to get a hold of me somehow. Dan knows how to get a hold of me. And Dan, I'm definitely going to be sending you all the data so you can share it as you need to, as you can. This is not proprietary in any way, but be respectful of those that made the reports. You know, don't deal with them at all. Just play with their reports and see what it came up as. And with that in mind, though, I'm also going to send all of the feedback, but I have blocked everybody's name out. You know, you're not going to know who gave that feedback, but in the after action report, you're going to see everything. I will also send out with that the player handbook and the emergency manager's handbook, which we got rave reviews about because it really helped give step-by-step instructions for those that have never done this.
one
Another
last,
good question in chat.
okay, I'll wait.
Let's see, Dan asked, are there any other HF digital modes that would find useful emergency disaster planning, or is it best to stick with one mode? Unfortunately, it's the skill level of the amateur radio operator themselves, what they're capable of doing. And we can guide them to what works best for that we know in our area. But unfortunately, we have a lot of issues. You know, you have a rich ham radio operator and you have someone, you know, on a shoestring budget ham radio operator. And so it's whatever they can function with. Victor has his hand up, I believe. Dan, you're muted.
Sorry about that, folks. Dan had his hand up earlier and I took it down thinking he was coming right on. And so we'll put him on and Victor, we can pick you up.
Okay, thanks. So the issue about throughput that I had a real eye opener on a recent exercise here in California, that if you consolidate these reports and just send the CSVs, your bandwidth requirements are logarithmically reduced.
Yes.
And that worked out remarkably well. Again, there are people who've been playing with this for years that we have the advantage of learning from. But that's just something to keep in mind, that you can in fact use HF as a means for getting stuff wherever it needs to go if all you're sending are CSV files. End of it. End of comment.
Okay.
All right.
Victor,
We had Victor next.
yeah, he had his hand up and he got back.
Thank you. Thank you. Over the past, I got my ticket 5 years ago. So I've had 2 fire chiefs and 2 emergency managers or deputy chiefs. All very strong individuals, very much concerned about the development of Office of Emergency Management, which included the ACS portion of the community. about a year into the pandemic, I asked my mayor about the budget considerations for Office of Emergency Management. And she said, you know, it wasn't until this pandemic hit that I really understood the value of the organization, the value of that part of the department. Whether it's budget considerations or other reasons, the Office of Emergency Management is now going to be a standalone division rather than part of the fire department. I think that's critical. I think that'll be a benefit. And for something like that, it's the idea that anybody who's in that department, those managers, they're going to get more, I think, I hope they're going to get more of a mandate to participate in these region-wide drills. And I think that's the direction we're headed. You're right, it's hard to get people involved. Snohomish County, I think Western Washington is pretty strong in that. I'm seeing a lot of emergency managers participating. And when you're in earthquake country like we are, it makes you tremble. I forgotten now how close Ada is to Rexburg, or should I say it the other way around? Earthquake country over there too. So something very much to be aware of and keep a positive thought on. Thank you.
Some good observations. We still have a lot of emergency managers connected to law enforcement, and they're driven by that. And one other thing, it's kind of late this year, and Dan can really address this too, though. Those that need equipment in an EOC or part of a club, ARRL has that grant program, and this is a great thing to promote. So, by the way, I'm putting my email address in the chat. So I did grab a couple of your chats with emails. I will get that information. If you want this after action report and all that data I talked about, you can send email there.
Okay, that answers what Dennis said there. All right, any more questions? As normal, I asked Barry, how's chat doing? And he says, no, I'm going to say all is good. Okay, well, we may end up wrapping this up a little short.
Can I add one more thing, Dan?
Yes, you can, sure can.
And we've had quite a few people drop off, and I understand that, but everybody that's still here, you have the interest, you're here. You are learning, you're here. You may be that person we need to become the liaison, the lead for ham radio with your local emergency management. Consider that, and consider getting some training so you can speak their language.
Thank you, well said. Well said.
And everything does look good in chat.
Okay, thanks, Barry. Okay, is there anybody got any comments? Oliver bailed out. I was going to say he had something to jump in here with, but he bailed out. Oh, Carolyn, go ahead. You got your hand up.
Yeah. I've been practicing with Winlink for a while now and learning it through the ACS, the Los Angeles Auxiliary Communication Service. And we did learn that you can send images through Winlink, but you have to reduce them to thumbnail size. You don't try to send a large image, but that will take forever to get through.
And that's very true, very true. One more thing I wanted to add, and it's too bad not everybody's still here because this is kind of cool. Because of this Winlink exercise, because of what we do as ham radios here and what we're doing, I've been talking with the Weather Service. And I kind of got them excited, those in my area that provide the NOAA that provides the weather service for us, that they can receive weather reports that have the Latin long attached to it. And we can send it directly to them, the data, be it however we wish. If it's like we had in Idaho, what's called Snowmageddon of 2017, we could know where the worst areas were hit. That's a great avenue. I encourage other people to maybe look at that avenue.
Is it a weather service form? Oh yeah, there is a form for weather, isn't it?
It's in the Winlink thing under the weather forms. There's ones you can do, and you just put the report right there with some comments if you want. It'll populate your Latin long if your computer knows your Latin long, or you can put in your Latin long.
Mhm. We did an interoperability exercise just last month. Well, it was a county-wide exercise, interoperability, and we used Winlink to send messages back and forth, as well as the radio. And it was very interesting. I was working in the EOC during that exercise, and I had a new experience of using a remote radio. The radios were in a different room from when the last time I was there. The radios were all in one room, but they had moved them to another room, so we were operating the radio by way of a computer, and that was an interesting experience. But yeah, sending Winlink, and we were using peer-to-peer and what's the other one? FL Digi, all of that stuff. I'm just learning it all, but I enjoy using Winlink. There's lots of possibilities for it for emergency management.
Thank you, and you're very accurate. It is very valuable.
You know, Carolyn, I might add that we are all learning. This is an ongoing thing, and this is what we're talking about tonight. So you're amongst the people and you're amongst good people here. We're all in the same boat. Okay, Diane, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Yeah, Don, thank you about the weather. It's a great suggestion. And what that means for me, it'd be really easy to get our weather office on my whitelist ahead of time so we can talk about it, make that relationship. Hey, I've got this new toy. So that's great. What a great idea. Another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the Weather Service years ago used, and some still do, keep HF radios in their offices, but they have nobody to use them anymore. So we found another avenue to possibly provide them data that would be beneficial, because eyes on the situation is the best information you can get.
Yep.
All right. I'm not sure here. Dennis, did you have your hand up first? Go ahead.
Yeah, just had a question, Don. I think that model that Ada County used for the someone as a scribe copying down the information and then inputting it could be used in an actual exercise or an actual event, because there are people that aren't going to be, that don't have Winlink and they don't want to figure it out. But if they're knowing that they can actually do it by voice to an operator that then could input it into Winlink, I think that's a really good model people could adopt.
And I agree, Dennis. What Ada County did, stepped up to the plate, figured out a solution, and did awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Okay, Dan, you got your hand up? Okay, Dan, you put your hand down.
No, sorry. I just realized that it's been since your exercise where Winlink made a very substantive change, and every message has either the center of your Maidenhair grid square, or if you've entered it in your GPS location form, the lat long in every message. It's no longer just the mapping stroke GIS forms that have that. So you can just write a text message of your own doing, and it can be geolocated by whoever you send it to.
Okay, and Dan, you are correct, but it does not work in the mapping program where you saw I just automatically grabbed all that information because it came from the form. It's good for one-on-one and stuff like that. And it's usually when you do your setup with Winlink, you can put in your Latin long. But if you're mobile and you move around, you're gonna have to change that. So you know, be aware of that. But do you realize in the mapping program, it's not going to create those lists that you have in the mapping that you have. You'd have to copy and paste and create your own.
It's a training point where presumably you're not doing Winlink while you're driving. And if you need to do something that's geo-referenced, you stop and you just put in your lat long because you locate yourself on the map, or use the compass. But I think it expands, it sort of addresses the fact that almost all the forms can benefit from being geolocated.
Agreed.
Okay, Tom, you got your hand up there, sir?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to point out that our Weather Service forecast office here, we made rotten sure that they've got an HF rig. And we made rotten sure that also in their hardened room, since they don't use it for what the Weather Service built it for, they have a mast and a continuously adjustable antenna. And everything that any of our people, our desk operators would need to quickly set up an HF link. We've got a 3-band beam that's currently under repair, but it'll go back up here soon. And we've got a horizontal antenna, a wire antenna that can be adjusted for height. And the problem is getting all the desk operators to learn that, you know, sometimes it's good to lower the antenna rather than raise it. This has proved to be a challenge. But they do have that equipment. I made that sly comment because I was on the desk one day right there in the forecast room, and the office came under a tornado warning. And so I did what it said in the book. I dashed out into the hall and started to hoof it down to the hardened room. And then I looked around behind me and there was nobody there. What Sam Hill? So I went back and looked in the forecast room, and through the glass, I could see they were all out on the lawn trying to get pictures of the damn tornado. So sometimes you just gotta chuckle.
Okay, Bill, in Idaho, go ahead, take it.
Yeah, just we're mentioning about just becoming the Winlink person, and that's kind of what happened to me in this county, is that until I can convince more people to get on board, I'm the guy. So and the emergency manager knows, and the sheriff knows. So if it comes down to it, at least this county has one person who knows Winlink, and yeah, they're going to have to feed the information to me, and then I'm going to have to pass it along. But at least we have that going. So that's one thing I wanted to point out, that yeah, I'm just a ham radio operator, but somehow I have this position now that I never thought I would have. And
Well, and Bill, you're right on. One thing I do recommend to anybody, Bill, you too, is maybe write down some things that are called just-in-time training, because when things happen, people come out of the woodwork to help. And that way you can give them some just-in-time advice on how to help you.
Right, okay. The other thing I want to bring out is when people who don't want to join clubs, I just hope people understand that most of the repeaters that are around here exist because of clubs. I mean, our club just dropped about $5,000 on a brand, on a new used repeater. And that was the club that put it together, so if you're enjoying the repeaters, you should be part of the club that's putting that repeater up on the mountain, because it's not free. And, by golly, it's, if you're going to use it, please be part of the solution, not the problem. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But I just wanted everyone to know on that one too.
Some good thoughts, Bill.
I'll add to that. A lot of people don't want to be a part of a club for one reason or another. I can't be a part of all the clubs around here. There's a bunch of them, but I do support the repeaters. I will send in my dues. I am a supporting member for most of the clubs around here, especially those that have repeaters. And that's what we can all do. Even if you don't want to go to the clubs for whatever reason, you can still support what they're doing, especially if you're taking advantage of it. All right, I think Carolyn, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. One about the lat long. If you put in your grid square in the settings in Winlink, it'll automatically populate the forms with your lat long, but it populates it right in the center of the grid square, not necessarily where exactly you're located. So if you want to have a specific location, you have to enter it yourself. And the second thing was that USGS forms, you can send it, we're in earthquake territory, but you can send in did you feel it reports via Winlink to the USGS as well. And they're always, we do it as an exercise, and we also do it when there's actually tremor that we feel. And they're very grateful to have ham radio operators send that information to them.
Yeah, that's very true. I've heard the Did You Feel It program really being successful.
Yeah, Oliver, who was on here earlier and filled out, was part of the development of that, and I was hoping to get some input from him. Okay, Victor, I think you're next, and then Dan, KUS. Go ahead, Victor.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about raising or lowering the antenna for proper transmission, and that's key. Along with that, I've learned over the years in many different radio operations, some people have a very, very hard voice, and other operators will tend to tune their radios up. They can't hear them, they can't understand. I says, turn your radio down, because you lower the volume, it doesn't hit as hard. And your ears are soft, it's gentle on your ears, and you can hear a person better. And people start doing that and they say, oh yeah, I see how that works. The other thing, if you real quickly, could you tell me where Rexburg is in relation to Boise?
Rexburg, it's a little ways away. It's more to the east.
Mhm.
Yes.
One thing that they taught us at ACS, that to alleviate that kind of a problem is to talk across the mic rather than write directly into it.
This is a good, very good example as to why we practice, why we have these drills, why we do this stuff. This is where we find this out, share this information. And we can pass this information to all of us now. That's great. Those that are on YouTube, that's great. But the best way is to actually practice using it, see how it works for you, where you're at on your station. Dan, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Okay, great. Don, I blinked when you showed that, how you brought the map down in the early part of your presentation. Would you be able to show me where that is?
You're muted,
You're
Don.
muted.
Now I'm not unmuted. There we go. Let me show you just real quick. I will bring up my Winlink. Okay, can you see my Winlink?
Yes.
Okay, up here you see different icons. There's the map right here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's a globe
Yep,
with
sure
cross.
can.
And there you go, and you're in there.
Oh, just that simple. All right.
That-
Yeah, I had to
there you
blink
go.
right when that happened. I appreciate it, Don. Thanks so
No
much.
problem. That's what we do.
The entire Winlink thing is very simple, but it needs to be played with. It varies a little bit with computer to computer, radio to radio, especially radio to radio, and operator to operator. Use it. Get out and learn how to use it. In Idaho, we still have Winlink Wednesday going, although I haven't gotten my emails here lately, and I've gotten some information from other guys that not getting their emails about that too. But at any rate, we still have that going. If your state or where you're at has a place you can practice, do it. If you're not, hop on board what we're doing over here. But get on there. Alrighty, folks. Any comments out there? Just open it right up. I want to say anything, do anything before I pull the plug.